Good morning. Greetings, everybody. Welcome back to the Micro Solidarity Podcast. My name is Richard Bartlett, and I'm here with Jocelyn Ames. Hey, Jocelyn. How you doing this morning?
Hey, Rich. Yeah, very good. Um, it's been, I think, at least 3 months since we connected about the incubator the first time, and I'm looking forward to sort of doing the aftershot, and
Yeah.
and like it's just gonna be a good part of digesting the whole experience. So I'm feeling, yeah, like excited and been thinking about this a lot, and keen to be asked questions because I often notice I don't know things until someone asks me a question. So I'm looking forward to yeah, doing this with your presence. Yeah,
Yeah. Cool.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I interviewed you 3 months ago, right at the very start. I think you'd been in the house for like less than 2 weeks, and at the end of the interview, which was also on the podcast, um, I said something like, "It'll be good to talk to you in 3 months and see if you're still smiling," because you were so enthusiastic and optimistic at the start. And I was like, "Yeah." I'm like, I wonder what's going to happen when the honeymoon ends and like what's going to be hard. I find it very interesting to learn about, and I think it would be good if we try not to recap too much. Like if someone's really interested in the project, they should go back and watch the previous episode and get more
Yeah.
of the background. Like where did the idea come from? How did you get started? A lot of detail around the formation of the intention and how you planned everything.
Mm,
Um, but I think just to ground the conversation for someone who hasn't heard that one, we could start with just like the quickest summary of like what's the incubator, who, what, when, why, how,
yes.
in a few
Yeah.
sentences.
Summary is the incubator was an experiment and experiment to catalyze people's creative and uh, personal ambitions and bring those to life through peer support, mutual support. So it started as myself, Nikki, Lauren, and Ananta, and also Chris initially in Berlin, having like a bit of a co-living time in the summer and supporting each other and being like, oh my God, what if we did this in the longer term with more people, more of our friends? What if we tribe supported the shit out of each other? and and that we literally said that phrase, and it ended up being pretty much that. We had 2 months in southern Spain, in Andalusia, in the El Almendrillo farmhouse that you and Nati found the year before. Has like 10 bedrooms and capacity for up to 18 people. We had somewhere at any moment we had between like 8 and 15 people there at once, I think. Which included the four core team and also Sarah, and at the beginning also Robin as our like assistant support team. Um, yeah, it was a guest house in the framing that people came for a minimum of 2 weeks, and so it meant that there were people coming and going. We decided to make it not to like prevent there always being people coming and going. We decided to allow people to arrive on a Monday only. So mostly people arrived only on a Monday. Yeah. Um, what else? Basics. Yeah, people stayed from 2 weeks to I think the longest was like 5 weeks. Um, there were very minimal rhythms. There was a Tuesday attunement circle the day after people arrived to tune in with like what do you want to experience this week. There was uh on Sundays we did a whiz bang cleanup, clean the whole house together, followed by a death ritual, which was a letting go of the week together, digesting and letting go. Um, Sunday evenings we would usually do a little goodbye ceremony for people who were leaving the next day, which meant they could decide what they would like to do in the evening, and we often did something like that. And then daily we had a dinner at 7, followed by the community mastery board, just like an agile tool to use to surface any tensions and uh, little tweaks we could do, and also look at what tasks need to be done the next day and who's going to do which tasks, like cooking, cleaning, picking people up, shopping, stuff. Yeah, the rest was completely open to whatever people wanted to do. People came from all over the world. We had people arriving from some arrived from the US, some arrived from Korea just before New Year's. So we had a very strange time warp with no one knowing what time it was around New Year's. And the first 2 weeks were deep reset, which is relevant because that was really yin. The Yincubator was like the real yin element was really there, digestion, decomposition. and the remaining time was what we call the yin combinator, based off this idea of the Y combinator of accelerating an idea or ambition people, and that was more getting into projects, and more the doing, but still with this like receptivity and emergence, sense and respond means being the main like mode of of being. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. And what
Mm-hmm.
about if you like zoom out as far or wide as you can? What is the bigger picture? Like, sounds like a really lovely couple of months in a house in Spain, um, but there's more to it than that, right?
There is, there is. It was a very lovely 2 months in Spain, and what excites me about it is I noticed I mean, there's a lot of these types of gatherings like flourishing up, especially around Teapot. I think the last couple of years, I'm not like, I've been deeply into Teapot, but if I understand, the first real like in-person gathering was something like, was it 2 or 3 years ago, something like that?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe 3 years
Yeah,
ago.
years ago. And there's been like just like more and more I keep hearing of, and I know there's people who just like want to go to every single one, and I feel there's like a hunger for these spaces, and not just that, but also other residential retreats. Like this idea of a pop-up retreat or pop-up co-living has really like taken off, and I think that like people are looking for finding the others, and I think that's been one of the main things of like, oh, there's other people like me or interested in this thing. um, a slightly like deliberately developmental space with a
Mm.
varying degree of partying and work, something like that. And most people maybe have an idea at some point that they might want to live in community together in some shape or form, urban or rural, who knows. I think that's been like largely um, like evolving on that phase, and yet I felt like a bit of a phase shift recently of people being like, okay, I'm meeting the same people there, I keep going, and I feel like something's gonna happen. And that's the sense I get, like people are looking for more than just finding each other now. They're kind of
Mm.
it's like an expectational potentiality of what could happen if we like if we hang out more, or what could happen between us. And I think we're like sort of hoping that will happen, and yet there I've always sensed that there might be structures. I think in microsolidarity we're looking for this as well, like what are the structures that um, tap into that latent potential of what could happen between us, like where could we collaborate, what could we really mean for each other beyond just hanging out. um, and I think that was like one of the missions that we had, and I think we managed to do a pretty good job of it without it feeling too overstructured.
Mm.
We managed to create a space where people found each other, and I think the minimum 2 weeks really supported that. People found each other, and like there was a lot of outputs in terms of like um, people's creative outputs of like creating films and music, but also like setting up a website, moving through an idea that they've been stuck on, discovering like giving each other IFS swaps and sessions to break through like the psychological barriers towards the things they want to do with their life. And there was a great sense of like not just hanging out, but like meaning something to each other, catalyzing each other, something like that.
Mm.
And I feel like that's, so at least that's what I'm excited about, like feeling more of in these spaces, and I think that's going to make them even more exciting when we actually like village and like barn raise each other's ideas, if you know what I mean. Yeah,
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I've seen this progression. I guess I have it in two dimensions. One is from online to in person,
yeah,
and then the other dimension is from like very, very short term, temporary to like slightly longer term to eventually permanent.
mm-hmm.
And I can imagine if you get a bunch of people together who have been hanging out online forever and they've never met each other face to face, then sure, putting them in a camp for 3 days, it's just like, wow, I'm so excited and I just want to spend all day talking and then all night partying, and that's going to
Yeah,
satisfy me. But then if it's 2 weeks and you've also done this event loads of times, it's like, by the time you get to the 2 week version, you're like, okay, I want something a little bit more meaningful or substantial, like not just having a
yeah,
good time, but actually making a difference on my life.
yeah,
Um, and my personal take on the long term, the permanent installation is like, I think we all, well, I think there's a lot of people that want to live in really just like a thriving neighborhood, like a good scene with lots of different overlapping subcultures and lots of collaborations and interactions and great art and political activities and starting businesses and getting married and all this like stuff happening. And to
Mm,
get there, you need like all of that is sort of supported by a really dense social fabric and people having some like high trust and high quality ways of being with each other. And this to me is like it's like that phase at the start, you know, when you turn the ignition on your car, it's like boom. Like,
yeah.
I feel like this we're still in the starter motor phase, you know, it's
Yeah.
like
I like that image. Totally. Yeah. What was some? I think it's like an answer just introduces concept of the Overton window to me, of
Mm,
like the window of what's possible. And I think that like as soon as we start, like a few people get the to catch, the the more that's gonna be able to like catch on. It's like, oh yeah, this is possible too. Um, yeah, and it felt like this was like a little bit of like a stretch of the Overton window happened, so a little bit
mm,
more towards the it catching was exciting. Um, I think something else I was gonna say there was I I also seen a trend where people are getting a bit jaded by the idea of like community living, because there's been a lot of experiments and people will think like, oh yeah, we all just want to do that, let's live together. And then it's like, oh, actually it's a lot harder, and actually we're kind of coming in with our own psychologies and our own trigger points. And many people struggle with like, how do we deal with tension and conflict? How do we deal when we clash, or realizing that we want different things. Like maybe some people want more of a it could be like mood, like, or tone. Like some people want more of a grounded, like slow rhythm, and others want more like fire and regular parties and lots of people coming through, lots of dynamism. Um, I think like sometimes we learn the hard way. Like you arrive in a community and you think that's it, and then it's like, oh, actually, this isn't really working for me. I need more private space, or I want more connection than people are offering here. I think a lot of people who've gone through the experiments end up feeling a bit like, oh, is it really possible? And something I heard
mm,
during the incubator was people saying like, wait, I'd kind of almost given up, and this actually feels like it's giving me hope again. Um, so I'm quite curious about like what exactly it is. I think partly it was like the structures and how we managed to like work a lot with letting those tensions be addressed regularly, creating a safe space for tensions to be addressed, and culture of like that's normalized. But there's something also I think about, oh, like the degree of mutual support is quite exciting. And like we're not just
mm,
like, we actually didn't frame it as a co-living or a community experiment, which is kind of the opposite of what I've been doing until now.
mm,
I've usually been like, let's do a community experiment, and then like a sort of add-on is how can we support each other. And this was like, let's see how we can support each other, and the add-on was, oh, let's see how we can live together well. It's kind
mm,
of part of the whole support each other thing.
mm.
And it almost surprised me when people were like, oh yeah, I could live in a community like this, I want to live like this for the rest of my life. Like, oh yeah, of course, like amazing. We just sort of landed on a success model, yeah, without really making that the priority. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I'm very biased, I think, in this. It's hard for me to play the role of like an objective interviewer because you and I work together so much that we have got
Mm,
really similar ways of looking at it. Um,
mm,
so I'm just acknowledging my bias, but my sense is that like you and your team kind of put in the minimum amount of structure to enable the maximum amount of belonging and connection and safety and mutual support.
mm-hmm,
Um, And I think that's what people were responding to. They're like, oh, it's very light, like it doesn't feel overbearing or like
yeah,
stuffy. Um, but it's also not completely emergent. There's like some intentionality and some design. It's like you've
yeah,
applied your specific expertise to this and you're like creating a kind of art form that, yeah, it's like gardening, right? Like there's this like, you can just be completely chaotic and see what happens, or you can be really intentional and do some research and run some
yeah,
prototypes and then, you know. Um, And I got the impression from what you've said and what I've talked to from other people there, like it feels to me like the incubator is actually like kind of close to a little package of social process structures, patterns, little architectural blueprints
Mm.
that we could reproduce in lots of places where, like let's assume there is some kind of diffuse scene. There's this like network of people who like have some warm feeling towards each other and would be happy to spend more time together. Assuming that background kind of nutrient exists, um, I think there's like little book of blueprints that you can drop in. And it's like use these structures and you're likely to have a really
Mm.
good experience. And I'm looking forward to doing my own version of that up here in Barcelona.
Mm.
And I wonder, just like top of mind for you, what are the like three things or the five things or that like just make sure you got these pillars in place, and the rest it'll be fine. But just like what are the chunks?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great question. I think yeah, something, and we definitely like having regular rhythms helps.
Mm,
So having this, like the rhythm of one shared meal a day, dinner, was kind of crucial, and also keeping it like being quite tight on like when that is. I noticed like
mm,
quite some tension developed when it even started going like it sort of crept until 8 p.m. and then people were like, then we don't have nice time after dinner and we're tired and we want to also, you're finishing work at the same time, and everyone can like align to that one moment in the day. I think it's important to have one moment in the day which everyone sort of puts their clock towards, sort of like the GMT of, of
mm,
the 24-hour cycle. So for us, that was dinner at 7, um, followed by the community mastery while people were still like, once you finish eating, we had the community mastery board, which maybe I can put a link to rather than explain the whole thing. But it was, I think this is another, like the second thing I would say, make sure there's a regular, clear moment for people to express um, tensions, but also possibilities of what they could imagine would benefit the space. So that was part of like the first element of the community mastery board is raising awarenesses. So like what possibilities or tensions exist that relate to how we are being together. So that drew people into taking a bit of ownership over the space. It
mm,
meant we could like sit back and people didn't come to us throughout the day being like, oh, I think this should change, or why don't we do that? Or, oh, I don't like how this is. Can I change that? It's like, well, bring it to the group. There's going to be a time. Anita wrote a really great Twitter thread about this, and she wrote that it was just really nice to know there's a moment where you can bring up your tension in the day. Um, yeah, and we weren't like looking for like solving it in one go, but the test was like, what's one small thing we could try out to try and move towards uh, improving the way we're doing this or integrating this new idea. Um, I think that was also it imbued this sense of, oh, it's an iterative experiment here. We don't need to get things perfect, but we're iterating, cycling our developments through. So I think having some sense of like iterative
mm,
process and really be helpful, because we especially as people were coming and going, we also allowed ourselves to let go of how we were doing things before, and the new people who arrived would see new opportunities and possibilities, and it helped them to feel they were welcomed as co-creators of the space and not just arriving into something that's sort of stuck and they have to build upon that. um yeah um I think having a shared moment of cleaning the house. This might
yeah,
seem like very like domestic and not very important, but it's again one thing that surprised me that we called it the whiz bang to give it a bit of character and a bit like that's not just called like the weekly cleaning up party, but like we created a lot of fun names for things. Not to try and like performatively make them more fun than they are, but just that's sort of what emerged and the name stuck. Sometimes participants actually brought names to things as well. But yeah, the whiz bang was something that my friend Donal introduced to me from Ireland in another community experiment. And, like the name just stuck with me, and I was like, let's do a whiz bang. Like the whole group got together on a Sunday at a specific time, 1 hour, and we're going to clean the whole house together. I also did this in Tree Week and noticed
mm,
the same thing, that it was like the main moment in the week where absolutely everyone was together and we were doing something constructive together. It gives the group an aliveness, and also you have a clear before and after picture. Um, people also had like a bit of an insight or a transformation of their relationship to cleaning the house, like where before it was like a
Mm.
chore, and here they were looking forward to the whiz bang. We put on some like banging tunes. We got into teams. Who wants to do the kitchen? Who wants the living room? Who wants to do the bathrooms? Everyone went off and did their thing, and they took ownership of that space. Um, and we invited them to like choose a space that they really like, so they can give extra love to it, or give a space, do a space you don't like, so you can redevelop your relationship to it and maybe change it into something that you like it to be. And so people were also making tweaks and feeling engaged, owning the space of the house as well. I felt that changed it from like them being in our house and having to look after it, and us being like, like
Mm.
if it ends up too dirty, towards them realizing like, oh, I cleaned the space. um I want it to stay nice. And I felt I could relax and like knowing that and sensing that everyone was holding the care for the space together.
Mm.
That was a good one too. Yeah. um yeah, other rhythms, other elements. I think if someone was doing this again, one of the main things, and this is a whole topic in itself, but like the art of the invitation
Mm.
was almost like preloading so much work for us that we didn't have to do during the time. We just made the invitation super coherent and clear, um, so that people who arrived there all were like mostly there for the same thing, even if they were doing different things. They were there for the same intention, and it meant that to find synergies and connect, it was only like a couple of interactions away each time. Um,
Mm.
and I think that was really crucial. That yeah, that's a big topic in itself, um, and the art of like who we invited, and being very like clear about that as well. Yeah, I'll pause there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's cool. I'm just mentally building out what are these key pillars. So that last one is
Mm,
like a precise invitation that aligns people's intentions.
mm-hmm,
And then there's the stable rhythms, which kind of create an even beat through the day,
mm-hmm,
especially dinner. You've got the iterative approach, welcoming intention, co-creating or like building co-ownership of like what's not ideal and inviting people to
mm,
test out things to make it better. And then the cleaning was an example of some kind of constructive collaborative action where everyone's involved and they all make the place better.
yeah,
um, that's four things, and there's no way that the ideal set has four. It's either three or five. So I want to propose a fifth, which is something about your role as hosts. Like
yeah,
the clarity and depth of which you guys are holding a position that I think is essential to the whole game working so well.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the most invisible structures of the whole thing. Everything else you
Mm.
kind of see, but there was definitely like the invisible structure of what we are and what we're not doing, what we have taken responsibility and what for, and what we are welcoming people into. We made that quite clear. We even wrote a little document about it, which wasn't really the given when I think we created it because people were asking us like, is this kind of like a burn where we're like co-creating everything? And if so, why are the hosts not paying for their stay? Why is our rent or our booking costs like covering your stay? And then other people being like, oh, it's not a retreat, like we're cooking for ourselves, then why are we cooking for ourselves if it's a retreat? It's like, no, it wasn't a retreat, it's not a burn. We called it um we called it a service from friends for friends. So we were acknowledging that we are taking some responsibility for the curation of the event, like who's coming, the costs, like how the fees would be distributed, which rooms people go in, um, even though people obviously had like some say when they arrived. If it really wasn't working for them, we moved people around a little bit. We managed the grocery list and the budget for that. Um, we set the first initial framework of like rhythms and rituals, and we hosted the death ritual, and we hosted the Tuesday Attunement Circle. We intentionally rotated the facilitation of the community mastery board. That was something we were very clear about, like this is for everyone to try, because that was a part of like initiating and supporting other people's development in owning the space and like practicing hosting. But yeah, I think it was quite clear to us, and I think it became clear to other people after we've written this Yincubator model document for people who asked us. We really wrote out the roles that we would take on ourselves and what we expected the guests to hold responsibility for, and also what the assistants would be doing. Um, yeah, happy to share a link to that document because we actually wrote it so that maybe others would also be inspired, or like get them thinking about what's your model
Mm.
for hosting and money. Um, yeah, that was good that people actually called us up on it when we were inviting people, because it helped us to clarify it and really, like, write it out and be honest and transparent to ourselves as
Yeah.
well about what we're doing.
Yeah, we should include a link to that document in the show notes because I found it so relaxing to read it.
Mm,
I felt like with these sort of like co-created social experiences as a host, I think we just tend to fall either on the kind of overbearing side or the neglectful side. And I've wandered back
mm,
and forth across that line. And seeing this document written out, it's like, okay, this is the sweet spot in between where it's really clear we're taking responsibility for a lot, but it's mostly invisible. It's mostly just the stuff that makes it easier to be together. And it's not like you're setting the agenda every day for what are we talking about or like
mm,
what are the activities that are happening, but it's all of the enabling constraints that
yeah,
make that stuff happen smoothly. And that as an organizer, as a host myself, it's quite relaxing to read that and be like, oh yeah, that is a really valuable service. I can do that. It doesn't take a lot of effort for me, but if it's not there, it's such a huge waste of energy. Like
yeah,
if you don't have a smooth system for handling the groceries and the cooking, it's just like, oh, okay, are we really gonna spend all these hours and inefficiency and waste of time just trying to figure out the most mundane facts of life? And then
hmm,
also, like you said, the slightly less pleasant job of um deciding who's in and who's out, which like is essential to creating a harmonious group. Having
hmm,
that delegated to a trusted leadership team to say it's their call. Um,
yeah,
I think it's like, yeah, hugely efficiency increasing rather than having to negotiate that by consensus with everyone who comes along.
yeah.
Maybe that points at the next kind of chunk, the next chapter I wanted to think about together is kind of like what was not so easy.
Mm, yeah, good segue there because that was like, I mean, the process itself of this deciding among four people about who you invite is one thing, but then also explaining to others why you didn't invite certain people, or people explicitly asking us, like, or saying, hey, I heard this thing's going on, why was I not invited? um I think that was like, it's inevitable when you create a curated invite only experience amongst friends within a larger network of friends.
Hmm.
um because I can so understand why someone was like, oh, my friend was invited, we were all in the same network, why was I not? Like, what's it's easy to take it personally. um so it was definitely helpful to come together and like be asked again, to be confronted with these questions, why I wasn't invited, and it helps us again clarify, like, wait, okay, this kind of, we our team was very like, co-sensing was our main thing, and sometimes we knew things without explaining with words what it was, but and that's fine for us as a group of four. But obviously people have questions, and then to answer them clearly and honestly was really important for maintaining our like trust and relationship and connection with people who we didn't invite in. um, so one thing that we realized was important to clarify was, well, we created this event a lot for ourselves initially, and then sort of invited in people who we thought would resonate with that. And the point of like the fact that we're living very isolated for 2 weeks, with inviting people for at least 2 weeks at a time to live in a quite an isolated space. Sometimes people are sharing a room. It's not a large group. We wanted to make sure that there was like, that we would feel there was enough like degree of harmony and shared intentionality in the space. Partly because we were a little bit nervous because it's the first time we've run an event together, and especially such a big one. I've never done such a big event, so it was a bit like, okay, let's play it a bit safe and just invite the people
Hmm.
who we all feel really good with. And it definitely meant there were people who I felt really good about inviting, but others were like, oh, I don't know. Maybe they'd had a bit of tension with that person, or they had something to still resolve before really being ready to live for at least 2 weeks together. Or, um, yeah, so it was a bit of sometimes also navigating that internally in our team as well. having disagreements about like
Hmm.
who we would find a good fit and who wouldn't. So we definitely like played it safe, which I think was good because it meant we could focus on what like it meant that what we wanted to do was really satisfying for us, and like it was just very nice to have people there who were like, oh my god, this is exactly what I wanted to be doing at this time of year. It's exactly what I was looking for. We chose people who had who we were aware that they had like some kind of ambition or project that they were working on, or people who we were quite sure they could like commit to 2 weeks away. So, and people who didn't work like a 9 to 5 job constantly at the computer, because we realized if we have people there who are constantly on calls, it would detract a bit from the like being available for each other for the mutual support piece. So it was like really important for us that we choose people who we knew we're gonna have they're gonna have some kind of capacity to show up for each other, um, and excitement about that as well.
Hmm.
So therefore, we also chose people who we knew like were quite good at supporting others, and we'd seen that with, and yeah, I guess it was also people who were like relatively familiar with these kind of group experiences, like they've been to a few gatherings before. Um, And I say this also because I also recognize it could be a constraint of how successful this could be if you replicate it, because we chose people who were like primed for this kind of thing. And I do wonder, if we expanded the group to people who maybe had less experience of like micro solidarity or tribe support, or less experience of being together in a group and um, like tuning into like what you need and being able to be proactive about approaching the group with with a request in a way that's attuned with what you think the rest of the group, where the rest of the group is at. um like those kind of skills are like not just something we can like take for granted. Like not everyone
Hmm.
has that experience. And I would be really curious to invite people in next time who are more like slightly more unknown to me, slightly more like wild cards. And that's something that I really learn, or I realize it's like my growth edge now is, okay, how can I um, be less safe while still inviting people for like being really clear with the intention and making sure people are really on board with that, but also not being quite so like also invite people who I know less well, for example, or people who are less well connected. That was also a really important factor. Where like we invited people who knew at least like 2 or 3 other people in the group. There's just one person who was our like main wild card who didn't know anybody yet, and yeah, it was interesting to see their experience. I think they still felt like quite a degree of belonging and like really like found their set themselves and found their feet. But it definitely I could sense it's like a different thing when people know each other and they immediately like this person and there's a degree of like nervous system like safety already, because you know that at least one person or 2 people like you know that they play the game in the way you play it, and you're not arriving like, what's the game here? And if we had a whole group of people arriving like, what game are we playing? It would
Hmm.
probably need a lot more onboarding. But this
Hmm.
allowed us to just immediately get to the point. Um, yeah.
Yeah, you've got this critical mass of people that are already relaxed with each other, right? And
Hmm.
it's like you don't have to manage all this anxiety at the start of the event.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Was there was there anything, like I'm still thinking about challenges. Definitely this inclusion exclusion thing. I know that's a challenge. I've had that with my own events too, and like
Mm.
just the burden of becoming a central node in a social network. Suddenly it's like, as they say, the emotional labor of like having to care about all these people, having to be understand all the gossip, and they're like, oh, don't put that person in the same group as that person because of this thing that happened, and
Mm.
all of that load. But I wonder, were there other challenges as well? Was there anything else about this process that yeah, it just felt painful or difficult, or like, oh, if you were going to do this, you really want to make sure you're prepared for this aspect of the game.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to like think how to like talk about this without getting like to being too personal or specific, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think something that I found challenging, or like that was, yeah, more difficult is when there are people who maybe feel like, I think everyone arrived with a little bit of like, oh, are my needs going to get met? You know, like there's a almost like an, I learned to like expect almost a certain psychology of like, maybe people will be like, oh, I need this and I need that, and please make sure you get this for me from the supermarket. I need to have my maca powder, or like the shower is not getting hot quickly enough. Like, yeah. And like, oh, I need more. I need to make sure I have space for my call tomorrow. Those kinds of things, which are all important. I think people like learned to. I think after 2 days, people realize that actually everything's good, and like there's an abundance of food in the kitchen. People are willing to share their spaces for Wi-Fi. The shower takes a little long to get warm, but it does get nice and hot. You know, you get used to sleeping in a new room and how much to open the ventilation and where the noise comes from. And you realize, oh, the community mastery board's there to ask people to like shut up after 9:30. Like it's gonna be fine. But I think what sometimes some people find a bit more challenging is like, I think just even being hosted or something, and like but there is a certain intentionality to it, to the space. Like there's a like, to keep up the quality of the container and be the edge without like jumping in. No, it's not that. It's more like, it's like uh I think like facing people's resistance to the thing I wanted to bring. And sometimes I felt a bit like stuck between, I don't want to be like the dictator of saying you have to do this while you're here, but I also don't want to be like floppy, and then this person takes the whole container another way to fit their needs, and then suddenly it's not the right container for all the other people who have shown up and responded to that particular invitation. Um, so what I think my edge there is to try and like find this way of feeling clear enough about my invitation, and really in my center, really in my truth about the invitation, really in my truth about what I care about and what's the minimal expectation, and really like confident about saying that's kind of what I expect from you in return for your, like, not in return for you, but if you're here, um, this is the minimal, like, that we're sort of expecting from you, like whether it's showing up to the attunement circle, which everyone did, which was really appreciated, like, or um, being available for other people, um, something like that. Um, so being like that, but also recognizing this person might just like have misunderstood the invitation, or like has different needs at the time, and people will always still read an invitation, and still some people might arrive and have expected something else. um and like then they have needs, right, and they're stuck there for 2 weeks with you, and can I support this person to um, articulate like and discover what actually they want, and like bring that into the group in an attuned way, and like um yeah, understand like the limits of what the container is, but also um, all the boundaries of the container is, but also support them to like find their way. And sometimes that looks like maybe it's not the right container. So I think that was quite is interesting. There's one person who actually we did together come to an understanding that like, okay, it's not the right container for you right now, and they left um, for a while and actually came back at the end. And but that was really interesting because they left, and then it sort of, we clarified some stuff about, okay, where about the fit or non-fit, and then their return was in a different way, and I felt like, oh, okay, there's more understanding now, like returning in a new way and showing up for what the container is, with now an understanding of what it is. um yeah, I think that was just a challenging experience for me to like kind of like put my big girl boots on and stand for the container while being also in connection, and not making it like personally you're a bad person, but like it's just not a fit. Yeah.
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 There's something, I don't know if I can articulate this, but there's almost something very delightfully paradoxical about what you're saying, because
Mm,
first you said that the your developmental edge, like the place that you like to grow into, is including more different kinds of people, people with less pre-existing connection, less skill, but maybe including people who are harder to include, and for
mm,
whatever reason. And then you're also saying you're getting more assertive or more grounded and more confident in the leadership role that you're playing. And it's the paradox is kind of like
mm,
maybe the more you can be rooted into your sense of like, what are you doing? What are you up for? What are people invited into? Kind of the more liberal you can be in extending that field of inclusion. This is,
yeah,
yeah, this it's
yeah,
quite a double helix thing.
yeah, yeah. I totally see that. You're right. Yeah, I think the thing is like I can extend the invitation openly and with more confidence when. No, I think I feel more comfortable opening the invitation when I'm even more clear about what it is, and if I'm not afraid to say like, "Cool, I hear you want to come because you're excited about it, and I want to be really checking like, do you know this is what it's going to be like? Do you know that this is going to be the minimal expectation of how you show up for the group? Do you know that you're going to be expected to be at these this is not this is like I mean everything ultimately is optional, but do you know you're kind of expected to show up for this little ritual or this little thing? Do you know that that's like part of like being there for the group? Do you know that yeah, the yeah, you'll have to share a room or something like that. And just that people are not having a question mark over things and then arriving and then only discovering then that they're actually not the right fit. It's like a mutual. I think the invitations are like I want them to be a dialogue even more about like me being really honest and them saying what they want and then us both deciding like okay is it a fit, and that might take actually more time than doing a generally like open invite thing. And yet for this kind of thing where we're living together for at least 2 weeks at a time with different people, it's like very important for me. So I don't want to feel like I'm there and I want to leave. I want to be there and be excited and enjoying being there because the people who I've invited want to be there for the same reason. Like that's just good for everybody. Um, yeah, it's painful to see people show up who you really love, but they've arrived in this thing and then you can't meet their needs or like the container isn't right for them, and they just either go into like rebelling against your container or into submission against it. And in either case, they start seeing you as like the not the enemy, but like the kind of the keeper of their world. And I really hate being in that position. Like, it's not what I want to be. Yeah.
Being parentified.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
It's
a fun
inevitable to
part of
some
the
degree,
game,
but
isn't it? Gosh.
yeah.
Oh, okay. If you want to
Yeah.
replay a
Mom's not
story
letting
about
us.
your, yeah, exactly. Okay. It
Yeah.
seems to be it seems to be part of the game that we have enrolled ourselves into.
To a degree, yes. Yeah. And sometimes I actually project that onto myself. I think people are thinking that about me. It's not even true that they are, but just it's yeah. Also something I need to like reconcile inside of myself and be super clear. Like I think you said like Natty said something really cool. She's like, "Oh, it seems that you're seeing me as your mom. I don't want to be like that. I'll be your sister." You know, like just being really clear. Like it sounds like she was really clear inside herself about how she's gonna stand up in the relationship and what you can expect from her. So something like that, I think it could uh, support me, or might be something I need to keep reminding myself of. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and Nati's phrase specifically was, "I'll be your big sister if you want." So
Mm,
like, sort of acknowledge, yeah, I do have some extra authority or some things.
yeah.
I'm more grown up in some way, but yeah, I'm not going to be a mum. I for my
Yeah.
version of that is I'm happy to call myself an uncle, but I don't want to be your dad. You know, it's
Right.
like someone who's maybe a little older or has more resources or yeah, more skills or more experience in some matters. But
Yeah.
for me, like the uncle role is like ultimately not responsible for your experience. You know, it's like they might be
Yeah.
generous, they might be helpful, they might be annoying.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thought that I was just having, this is slightly out of the blue, but
Mm,
sort of it's part of the process of getting started. I wonder how did you test uh, whether or not the idea was likely to succeed?
mm,
What gave you the confidence to say, yeah, we're going to book this place and spend this, 10 or 15,000 euros or whatever it is to make it happen?
mm. I guess I mean partly like iterative incremental experiments help. So for example, that the four of us and Chris had also been in Berlin for 4 weeks together and sort of prototyped it a little bit, and like we really tuned in with each other and what we want and what we like, even took a time, we like a crew, and we took time to even like we like gathered like 4 hours once and just loved it. We just so in it. It wasn't expected to be 4 hours. We just each of us went through our lore of like where have you come from that's made you who you are right now, and we
Mm.
could just see the common thread and we could feel the shared wish for something like this. Um, there was a lot of synchronicity there that doesn't happen just with any group just because you share your life history. I mean, you might discover something like unexpected, so I still recommend it as a cool practice. But yeah, there was something about the cohesion within our team and the sense of like resonance and almost like an intuitive co-sensing of like we were able like this uncanny thing of sensing into what wants to happen rather than like pushing for like what what we think should be. You just It was a lot of like tuning in from what feels right and what wants to happen, what's exciting for us. So we were really going along with like our enthusiasm and capacity, which became a whole meme throughout the whole incubator. The whole thing was like, where do you have enthusiasm and capacity? So we were like very much embodying already the type of container that we want to bring. So it was quite easy to like really draw out that invitation and and be clear on what we wanted, and knew that we had a big enough pool of friends who would resonate with that, who would be like, even no matter what the invitation, they might actually be like, oh, hanging out with you guys, yes. I think they would understand the sense of like what's the fifth between the four of us, like what's that
Mm.
entity and the energy that we bring. I think there's something about clout or like being known and people knowing what kind of space you create, that we knew people would trust us, even if it was a bit experimental. Another was just our collective experience. Like since 2.5 years, like I've gone from um, being nervous about introducing the open space technology at the Belgium Microsolidarity Gathering to gradually having more and more experience of being able to like lead summer camp 2 years ago, then support the crew that hosted summer camp last year, and seeing you do the 2 or 3 months with Nati and Guy and Martin at Almendrio last year. So I knew the space already. That really helped. I could sort of like do a copy and paste, but iterate upon that and make it my own kind of thing. And that Nikki had been there as well was super helpful. But there was also a degree of risk. We wrote out a financial model, economic risk. We wrote out the financial model and we're like, okay, how much does the rent of this place cost? And if we imagine like no one comes except like Robin and Sarah, our sisters, how would we feel about splitting the cost equally between us? It's like, well, that would still work out probably a bit cheaper. Um, well, or like maybe only slightly more expensive than our daily living in Berlin or something like that. So it was like, okay, fortunately it's a venue that's not too expensive relatively. Um, yeah, I think a combination of those things really helped. There's still some moments where we were like, oh, the number of people who we're inviting. Somehow at some point the budget would be like, oh, we make a loss because of the expenses of their food and stuff and like other expenses like hiring a car and everything. But um, it all worked out well in the end. So we came out like just a little bit above even, so that's really good. So it was actually economically viable in the end. Um, yeah, I think it was like just mostly the experience that we all had held together. Like Ananta's run
Mm.
medley, you know, we've all been to like many gatherings before. Actually, we the more we were in it, the more we realized that every experience we'd had at previous gatherings has taught us about something we want to bring in or something we want to be cautious about. Like I really learned from Tree Week, one of my first like real teapot gatherings, of just like it's okay to let people have their experience. I think from my other gatherings, and especially when I was supporting nonviolent communication trainings, it was very like, if someone's having a bad time, I've got to go in and support them, give them empathy, and like, it's so tiring. And I was like, wait, you can just let people have an experience, and they're probably going to be better tomorrow. And if they're still struggling after a few days, like I help them out, but it's okay for people to have a bad day. Just make it a good place for people to have a bad day.
Mm.
That's okay. Yeah.
That's awesome to hear. I really think that's Jess's influence. I think Jess was
Mm,
basically the one, as far as I'm concerned, who started the culture of teapot gatherings, and she's got this really graceful way of getting out of the way and just letting people
yeah.
have the experience they're having. She's like, I'm going to make sure that there's food on the table and that the showers are hot, but
Yeah.
your feelings are up to you. And
totally.
it's like
I
a
appreciate that a
stretch for
lot.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, I was quite nervous the day before people arrived when we were setting up, and I kept coming back to this mantra. I was like, just make sure people have food and they have a bed and they have hot water. Everything else will look after itself after that. Like, I trust us, but just give them the foundations, and then you're doing a good enough job to begin with. Like, that's good. That's good enough. The rest, let that be the cherry on the cake. And it,
Mm.
yeah, it was a helpful orientation. Yeah.
It can be stressful though, right? Like we've just got this new place in Barcelona. I've network of friends have loaned me a bunch of money to take it on. We just got a loan of 50,000 euros to make it happen. And there's something about both the financial risk, like 50 grand's a lot of money for me.
Mm,
And more importantly, I think there's a sort of reputational risk of, hey, this is my hopes and dreams on the line. This is me
yeah.
giving my absolute all to something that I care the most about in the world. And it might not work.
Yeah.
It might be really lame, or maybe people won't come, or maybe like it'll just be average and not a big deal,
Yeah.
or like that. Part of the process for me is going through these periods of like sleepless nights and just like
Mm,
it's incapacitating stress, and then you just kind of shake it off. And you're like, okay, it's fine. I'm pretty sure it's what the world needs. So I'm just gonna have to keep doing it. And then it
yeah.
usually, my experience, it just keeps turning out well. Yeah, it
I
makes
feel
me
you.
wonder, were there did you have sleepless nights on the way in?
Uh, on the way there, I mean, not too much. I mean, just beforehand, I was like with my family in UK, and we're having a lovely time, and there's a lot going on, and so I was more excited, and I think I just had such a trust in like the team of four. I think that if I'd done it with just Nikki or just Ananta, just Laura, like I might have felt more nervous. But I think like the capacity of the four of us, and we've been tuning in well together beforehand, and like making our meetings more regular, really in touch with each other. Um, that was that was good. Um, but I did have some sleepless nights sometimes when, like, on the days where it was maybe questionable about, like, maybe there's some tension or someone wasn't having a good time, and well, what are they going to like send back to their friends back in Berlin? And when I get back there, will everyone be like, oh, I heard the incubator wasn't very good? I was like, that was so dreadful. I had such fears about that, so I could really get the reputational risk thing. I really felt that sometimes. And it like definitely got under my skin. Then things would go well again, and it's okay, but it just takes one person to be like having a bad experience, and then maybe asking for support outside the the group, and then I'm like, oh, how does it ripple through the network? Will people think it's bad?
Mm,
um and as you said, it touched me when you said like it's something you deeply care about. I feel like it's like my life's work, and it's not like a hobby for me. So when uh when I do this, I put everything in, and it's like it's it's on the one hand like an experiment and a research that is good for the other things I do in life, like mediation and conflict transformation, and helping others to do these kinds of things, and running the micro solidarity network, and knowledge building. But at the same time, it's also like the thing is a thing in itself. Like that's like my main like work and showing up is during the project, and as things are happening, like learning as I'm going. And it's like it can be very vulnerable. And again, that's why I'm so glad there are four of us, because we all went through our wobbly phases or tired phases, um, and sort of managed to take it in turn very gracefully. And the others could be like, no, this is good. It's a challenging moment, but like it's good. Yeah, there was having said that, though, we were mostly in celebration, and
mm.
really at the end we were like, can we celebrate now? We kept wanting to celebrate. At the end we were like, yeah, you never know what can happen next week, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Just reflecting, it's kind of interesting, sort of surprising to hear. When I was asking you, how did you have the confidence to pull this off? I
Mm.
was thinking like, oh, maybe you had checked in with a lot of people that you knew wanted to come, and you'd sort of
Mm.
checked ahead of time that like you have the mandate or the demand is there. But really, it sounded like the main theme was you had trust in your own experience and you trust in your
Yeah.
team, and the like quality of the bonds between them is just like, well, whatever happens, it'll be good because we got an amazing crew.
Yeah, I think so. And we are just so excited about the intention, and so excited about um, making something happen. I think we also just I hear about people saying they want these kinds of things. I know that people want to leave Berlin in the
Mm.
winter. I know that people enjoy these kinds of gatherings. It was a bit of a risk, like, would people want to commit for 2 weeks? Could they do that? But by and large, they like people did. And yeah, in fact, we had like 5 people stay on at least one extra week, which was cool. People really wanted to stay longer. That was a nice sign. But yeah, how we knew. I didn't really check in with many people beforehand. At least I don't remember having conversations with people about, hey, what do you think of this idea? Except maybe Sarah. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just blind
Personal experience.
confidence.
Yeah, yep, can go a long way. Yeah.
Um, I've still got loads of notes of different things we could talk about, but I'm wondering, I want to kind of prioritize what feels most important. Like,
Mm,
um, you're in this phase of kind of wrapping up this chapter. I mean, one thing that should be probably useful to talk about is next chapters, but also, yeah, it'd be good if you could start just seeing if are there other, I don't know, big themes or topics or questions or challenges or things you're excited to
yeah.
share or like, yeah.
There's one that I'm still sitting with, and it's like offboarding,
Oh
landing back
yeah,
home.
yeah.
Yeah. I had a really rough time coming back. I mean, there were also other factors, like I moved into a new flat, um, and it's the first time I've moved in with Nikki, even though Nikki and I were like sharing a room when we're at the incubator. He's my partner, like living together for the first time, like in his house, and um, uh, but it was really a shock, or it's like I think I just went into like I don't know how to meet my social needs in the same way. It was almost like it's just like coming back from a festival where you're in this altered state of consciousness, almost like pretty much. Like I think being in a community is an altered state of consciousness. I feel for myself, I know people are different. For myself, my neural networks and my consciousness is like in the field, and I'm especially as a host, I guess, and picking up what's happening. I'm kind of constantly attuned, and I get used to that, and I feel for me that's very grounding, and it's like I am part of a whole. And then I come back and suddenly I've got to do all my cooking and cleaning together, sort out all my needs, my grocery shopping. There's no people to share a rhythm with, so my whole like schedule of when I eat went off. And of course, I'm living with 2 other people, but it's still like we're now in the city and we're doing our different thing. Nikki's very different. He's like, oh, all these people, okay, I can have my own space, and he regenerates by being on his own. So he had like mostly like just in his like cave for a week. Um, so I recognize people have different systems, but for me it was like, wow, existential reality check.
And not
And
not just you, right? Like we heard this a bunch of people.
yes, exactly, and that's my concern. Concern really, like with a small c, is like, or curiosity, like what do we do? How do we care for each other better when we come out of this? And I think part of it, like micro solidarity, talk about crewing, and like the idea, like maybe bring something that you appreciated about how you work together back by forming a crew around something that you want to embody more in your daily life, or set up patterns and habits that emulate some of those qualities. Um, and yeah, I think it would have been nice to maybe, one idea I had is if people who left, like that they buddied up with someone who's still there, and that they
Mm.
have a call like a few days afterwards, just like check in. And I remember I did that after the Belgian micro solidarity gathering with Vox, and I think we had a call like almost every day, and really supported me um, to land and like chat with someone who'd been there. Um, I think that would have also been. I was glad that Lauren and Ananta were still in town. They came back to Berlin with us. That was very helpful. And yet still I found it very difficult to just like leave the house and go into this busy street. I live in Kreuzberg in the middle of Berlin, and like it's very different to seeing this huge 270-degree view of the mountains and hills, and only be with this fixed group of people, and the closest village is like half an hour walk down the hill. um so it was overwhelming, and I think I needed to just, eventually I realized I just need to grieve a bit,
Mm.
and like
Mm.
the grief, let the grief show me like what's so important to me that was there in that community experience, and allow that to inform my next steps of how I want to design my life. I realized I just over and over again that I am someone who needs to live amongst people and share daily rhythms with, I like a group of 12. That's my natural good sweet spot. Not for everybody, but that's mine. So I wonder, like, how could we support each other to, like, maybe go through that grief in a sweet way of, like, connecting to it and normalizing, naturalizing the feelings that come up. And maybe there could be some kind of a check-in. Like, I think I still want to do a whole group digest, even if it's online, because not everyone lives in Berlin, but um, something like that. I'm still kind of wondering. I want to hear from other
Mm.
people, like, what helps
Mm.
you settle back in and like take what you got from that peak experience into your life and create your life around what you valued. Yeah.
I really like the concept of someone who's still there 3 days later has a call with someone who's just left, and
Mm,
frame that conversation of like, tell me how you're suffering and what does it tell you about the life that you want to live. Like,
yeah.
that feels pretty psychoactive, actually.
Mm, yeah. I'd like to, yeah, definitely bring that in next time in
Mm.
that framing. Exactly.
To me, it feels a lot more powerful than a group call, because the group calls, it's like, especially online, it's like, oh, I'm on
Yeah.
Zoom, I'm being facilitated.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
doesn't fully like reach into tendrils into your heart in the same way.
Yeah. I recognize that. It's very like, oh, I miss you guys. And that was amazing. But yeah, something with a bit more space to actually sense into what is actually being touched in you. I think that'd be quite powerful. Yeah, open for exploration. Mm, yeah.
Is there more to say about next time? Next step, next chapter?
Mm, yeah. I mean, I'm just applying for some funding, which would be very helpful because we want to actually write a report and like do a bunch more interviews on this. So if like the other three actually would also love to be interviewed. They just the more we talk about it, the more we're harvesting, what we actually took from it, and we'd love to capture that and not make this like an isolated experiment, but bring it into like a bunch of toolkits. I want to create a toolkit for the community mastery board, which so many people were like connected with and wanted to bring into their daily life. Um, but also, yeah, we definitely want to do it again next year. That felt like an obvious thing. It just felt
Mm.
fantastic, also just for our own annual rhythm of having that time to, especially like the deep reset, just drop things, just digest. I just felt my system like in such an alignment with the year by allowing that together with people to be together as you reflect and digest, and then allow the seedlings of new ideas and inspiration to incubate together with people who are curious about you and having good conversations. And then towards the end of the incubator, I could really feel us all going into like planning and structure and setting up our rhythms for the year to come. So I'd love to do that again. It doesn't have to be there, but somewhere with that holds the like the right environment for that to happen. But in the meantime, we're like, that's so far away. We actually curious about this thing of, does it have to be a residential experience to to create this kind of we call it, landed on this was like people accelerator environment.
Mm.
Like not a business accelerator, but a people accelerator. Does that have to be residential? Do people have to head off to Spain and be in a beautiful environment, or can we do that within cities? Um, so we want to do like a month-long experiment in Berlin, probably like August, September time, called the Berlin Incubator. We're still playing around with the idea, but like we're wondering what would be the minimal structures, and we could open it up to a much larger group. But yeah, how would we create that mutual support uh,
Mm.
vibe, and especially where we're living, where we don't just like all disperse afterwards, but like it can just continue. And I know a lot of people like to come to Berlin um, for like not to live here, but we've got a lot of people from our network who would probably love to come for just a month. So that would be a cool way for them to come and actually not just like see what happens and see if people want to
Mm.
hang out, but be like,
Mm.
yeah, let's hang out, but let's also activate each other's ambitions. And I know that September is a time where I'm coming away from the summer of festivals or gatherings or lots happening, especially like in Berlin. It's just people are meeting all the time. And after a while, I get a bit tired of that. And by September, I'm like, wait, I want to concretize my gifts into an offering before the winter comes. Like that's like my best work happens. So I'm wondering if that's what other people would feel around that time, where it's like, um, let's get serious now and like do something. Some people also run out of money a bit after that time, and they're also a bit like, okay, I got to make something happen
Yeah.
and bring it together. Um, and not so much wanting to have like the big, like massive group feel, but want to hang out in more smaller pockets. So I think I might design it a bit around this like smaller group within a larger group of people holding an intention to tend to each other's dreams, something like that, while
Mm.
creating connection. Yeah,
It's really interesting. You specifically, but I think your crew in general seem to be really locked in on this, understanding the different vibes at the different points in the year. It's like, okay, September, I want to take all my festival energy and turn it into a new work plan.
hmm
December, January, I want to like turn into a mushroom. February,
yeah,
March, I want to launch out into the world again. So,
yeah, yeah,
makes sense. It makes perfect sense. I don't usually think that way, but I can see like especially the Berlin being in Berlin at the end of August, the start of September. I've been there a bunch. I've done exactly that a few times, and so yeah, I do want to stop just
yeah.
lounging around in parks. I want to like go
Get
somewhere.
going now.
It'd be really
Yeah,
interesting to see what happens in a city non-residential context where you don't have the same density of experience. You've got much more
yeah,
external exposure, way more opportunities, but also way more distractions. Like,
yeah,
it'd be cool to see.
yeah, yeah. Gonna have to think about it quite differently. That's gonna be an interesting challenge. Yeah, it might be a complete flop. I definitely want to try.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And a complete flop. Again, it seems like the stakes are pretty low when it's
yeah,
non-residential. It's like the expenses and everything, or like people are not so invested in it emotionally if they're not staying together.
yeah. We were thinking of hiring a third space to make it a bit more like having a node, which could be interesting. Yeah, but yeah, it's definitely much lower stakes. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. So we'll probably be sharing about that in a couple of months' time.
Great. Great.
Hmm
I also feel the urge to pitch a little bit my own plug.
Mm, yes,
So yeah,
what's happening?
like I said, we just got this house. There's a very rudimentary website at eltilo.casa, Eltilo, named after the giant Tilo tree. It's a big linden tree with a long dining table for 30 people outside on the patio next to the swimming pool. That's the kind of like dream peak experience for me, is like having this big dining experience with the fairy lights
Hmm
under the tree. We're going to be running a lot of events there, and specifically the ones that are like quite Yincubator flavored. We're going to do 1 week each month, where it's like open for people to join. Well, by application, but it'll be a great place to meet other like community nerds and have some quality time in nature and some shared experiences and connection and tribe support the shit out of each other, as you guys say. So if you jump on that website, you can see there's a little application form. We've currently got weeks open, and I think we've got 3 or 4 weeks open from like April to July, and then we're going to keep doing it for the next year or two. So yeah, we're really excited about just meeting all the kind of people that are listening to this kind of podcast. It's like if you've been listening to this podcast, you're the right person. Come along. We want to see you. Um, we want to make it work. We've got some awesome people we want to introduce you to. You know, it's like we're really starting to get some momentum going in this scene, in this development of a subculture. So I'm excited about seeing people come out of the woodwork and not just be in the audience, but at the dinner table.
Mm. I'm excited. I'm definitely looking forward to being there for a while. It's so beautiful. And I like this idea of um having a core image on the vision board of what you want to center your vibe around. Like that dining table with the fairy lights is like, okay, that paints it for me. I think we had something similar with the incubator. It's like this like energy of like people going on walks and like having these conversations together, or like
Mm,
yeah, just any like little images that come up. It's really really valuable and beautiful. It paints it for others as well. You really feel it.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
Are there any other last post-it notes sitting on the mental fridge?
Mm. uh Nothing specifically comes up just now. But just yeah, grateful for, well, one thing, just grateful for actually all the um experiences that I've had and all the people who have like added to my capacity to feel confident enough to do this
Mm.
kind of thing and it feeling easy. Like I learned a lot from emulating people like yourself, Rich, and having my peers like Jonas, and yeah, people like Sarah Bajor and Sarah Pelham and just all the people who did the summer camps and just watching and learning, doing and getting feedback. It's just really helpful and it's really exciting to um, I think that's really the value of this, the micro solidarity network, but also the wider networks. Just I celebrate the amount of like you can just try things and people you can throw an apple and people will catch it and throw it and like that energy in this network is just really delightful. I think very powerful. So um, if you throw an apple, I hope someone will catch it for you as well if you're listening in. So if you want to do this, yeah, I really recommend having a look at Rich's blog, the one about like the incremental stages of hosting and like looking at your capacity and just maybe if you could put a link to that as well, Rich, and just look at where's your next growth edge. Where could you experiment with taking any of the principles or hosting styles that you want to experiment with? How can you do that in a way that feels like a little bit growth edgy, but not freak out, and that's okay if it fails, safe enough to fail kind of experiments. And yeah, I really dream of there being a whole bunch of us who can do these kind of experiments, and eventually having a bunch of us who can like graduate to hosting permanent spaces like you're doing, Rich. I think that's really exciting to see that that's where it could go, um, and creating like a pilgrim's pathway where we could
Mm.
like learn from each other and travel and visit each other and cross pollinate. Yeah. Yay.
Yeah, yeah, I really echo that. I think it's kind of been a little bit missing from this conversation because we've been having it already offline, but there is a pretty deep current of celebration. Like you did an awesome job. You personally, you collectively as a group, like the wider scene, the people showing up to support you and like um yeah, it was just that was fun for me to witness like right, there's a kind of graduation going on here and
Yeah.
to anticipate like, oh, what's the next? What's the next graduation? Like I didn't even know what the next threshold is. Like that's kind of as far as my imagination went. Like, oh, what are you guys capable of? Like, what comes next? How exciting!
Yeah. Yeah. Same here. Same here. So good. Yeah.
Very good. All right, let's leave it there, and
Yeah.
I have some links to include apparently. And yeah, come and hang out with us in Barcelona, people.
Yeah. Or digitally on Twitter. You can find me at Aims for Joy and Rich here. Rich Decibels. Yeah.
Yeah.
Put those links there too. Cool. Thank you.
All right,
Bye for now.
everybody. Have a very micro solidarity afternoon.